that point, our military gets really spread around the planet, and at the same time that we see a huge move relative to the dollar. And that covers all of November, December, January, and February of 2010. And simultaneous with that, beginning in this summer, are the international riots against starvation and the way that things are organized, where the bankers own it all, etc. That continues in its own thread that leads to the active revolution stage just as the military starts going crazy in November. And then that thread goes all the way through into about end of October 2010.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy.
It's not good.
No.
You know, I mean, I look at it this way. There's three possibilities, and they're all of them are relatively stark. But the three possibilities are that I'm an absolute nut job, and all this is just totally meaningless, and none of it will occur.
Right.
Okay. Given our past history, that may not be the case.
Right.
Okay. So that's possibility number one. I'm absolutely nutters. Possibility is number two is that I'm absolutely nutters, and it doesn't matter because I'm accurate, and we'll have something like this war show up because of the linguistics. Then there is this third possibility, and this goes again to the idea of the linguistics. Bear in mind, we don't get descriptions of the events. We really get a shading, a shadow of the words that will be used after the event has hit the mass consciousness. So maybe the war information stuff we're seeing in October and November could be expressed in any of these three different ways. The first way is, giant headlines, you know, Cliff High is a nutter, war didn't happen, ha ha ha, you know, somebody go poke him with a stick and wake him up. The second one could be that the headlines read, you know, giant war, lots of people dead. The third one could be that, everybody listened to me, and we all got together and declared that this was not to happen, and it didn't happen, and therefore the third possibility could be giant headlines, hey, we did it, we averted war. Basically, the linguistic sets would be all the same. They would all discuss war in the same kind of terms. We would just have a different flavor on the three of them. And so I would hope for it to be one or three, but I'm afraid it's going to be two.
Well, let's all work for two, or three, rather. Let's all work for three.
Well, I don't care if it's one. You know, if everybody says, hey, you're a nutter and so on, that's fine. My you know, ambition has always been to be a boat bum anyway, so I'll quite happily take my sailboat out and just putter around.
There you go. Wouldn't that be delightful?
Yes.
All right, so here's the thing, because you brought it up, and I'm going to ask you the question now. This is from somebody that wrote in earlier today, and they said, October 26th event plus lag time until reaction slash manifestation early November. Well, on Sunday, November 11th, we enter the sixth night of the Mayan calendar.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forget about that, yeah.
Okay, and what significance does that have for you?
Well, the night on the calendars are usually the point at which we discard those things that don't work and we get into the grumbles, if you will. So the fact that it's coincident with an area that we've already identified really tends to sort of make sense. I've always maintained that astrology is accurate. I've never had the opportunity to study it. It's something you really have to get into when you're young and devote time to, and it sort of missed me in that regard. But I kind of wish I had studied it because it would give backing to a lot of the dates that we've got here.
Okay. Here's another question. Will the monetary collapses coincide with the new energy releases, e.g. 0 point? And if so, is there anything really to worry about?
Sure. There's tons of stuff to worry about in my estimation. And no, insofar as we've been able to determine, the new electrics don't show up until about 2015.
Ah, okay.
So there's going to be, perhaps an 8-year lag time because the dollar will go at the end of 2009.
Okay. And I'm not real comfortable with the term worry.
Right.
It doesn't change anything.
Sure. No, it's how do they phrase that? That's a payment on a debt not yet taken.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so here's another question. When will we in the U.S. see the real UFOs, as in lots of them all over the country?
That's a little problematic because of our military. We'll be one of the very last countries that'll actually occur in because our guys have a tendency to shoot them down. They don't want those exposures here in the U.S. because you have to understand this. At the core of the whole idea of interdimensional or UFO travel, which is basically interdimensional, we have at that core hyperdimensional physics. that is also at the core of zero-point energy. It's also at the core of enlightenment, spirituality, etc., and it's all tied together, and the powers that be don't want that spread within their empire, and by that I mean the Anglo-American empire that's ruled by the central banks. There's 3 countries or 4 countries on the planet that don't have a central bank, and typically they're the ones we label the axis of evil. Now, some of them are stupid, like North Korea, and they are indeed evil just because of that stupidity. But others, like Iran, they've seen the horrors of a central bank, and they just don't want one. That's why we're trying to have everybody beat them up. Who's the head of all of the central banks? Well, okay, you could say that they're Jewish, but I prefer to think of it as them being Zionists, which ties them back to Israel and so on. So there's plenty of stuff to take us down a rather non-productive few years here.
Right. Okay. Somebody wants to know about some updates, whistleblowers with the alien trans-dimensional devices, if there's any new information on that, and also about the scarred woman, if that showed up. I didn't see that in there, but I might have missed it in the number 6.
Yeah, we throw in personalities like this, and it's a woman who wears scars, okay? Now, so I could be misinterpreting that. It may be that she doesn't have scars on her physical body, but maybe she does and she wears veils. Or this is just how the language comes on out, and so until she actually shows up, we're going to be uncertain. There's just this another female personality popping up that will be a good temporal marker through this period of time. The last time we had these sorts of sets, they started describing a woman who had connections between Europe and Central America, et cetera, and it turned out to be, what's her name, that was released by the rebels in Colombia, that had dual citizenship between Colombia and France. Her name escapes me at the moment. And she went back on home in France, and she met our linguistics by coming out and saying, she was held for 6 years as a hostage, and yet she comes back and says, we can't hate these people.